there are 30 million international travelers, but every year 10 million new passports are added, right? That means, there are more passports being issued to people in India than credit cards, and that's a big feat, right? I've always believed that solve a problem for a very small niche first and then scale. The problem was that when you start a travel company during COVID, that getting from 1 to 10 becomes really hard, and 10 to 100 also is very hard. Indians had a dating app called Dilmin, and so on and so forth, right? So I went on all these dating apps, created profiles. I started sort of talking and going to dates just to understand how they travel and what they travel.
So you went on actual dates?
Yeah, several. What I've learned during my limited time is always raise more than what you think you'll need, and then always spend less than what you think you should.
How are you? Good to meet you. Thanks. Good. How are you feeling? All set for this? Yes.
Welcome to Day One Podcast, a series where we focus on founders and companies that Elevation partners with and speak to them about their journeys. Today, we have Mohak here with us, founder CEO of Atlys. Atlys is radically simplifying the visa application process for travelers, and we are delighted to partner with Mohak on this journey. Over the last 12 months, they have helped about 1 million travelers get their visa in a rapid fire time. Welcome, Mohak. Thank you for coming over here.
Thank you for having me.
So interestingly, Mohak himself is a very avid traveler. He's traveled to 36 countries, has applied to 60 plus visas, so knows the pain of a visa applicant dearly. If any one of us has applied for a visa, you would know the clamor for spots for a visa interview, the long queues, and at the end of the day, there is this fear of rejection of your visa. And that can give nightmare to even the most avid travelers. So this space is ripe for disruption, and Atlys is changing all of that. It's not just about visa, but Atlys is giving more freedom to people to travel. So Mohak, maybe we could start by just you walking us through what does Atlys do, what was the journey, and what was the genesis for you to chase this idea?
Absolutely. So first of all, thanks for having me on the show. And thanks for supporting us, more importantly. But what Atlys does, we make it simple for anyone to apply for a visa. And our USP is that we bring certainty into a process that's previously been riddled with complexity and uncertainty. And the way we do it is that Atlys is the only platform in the world which can predict to the minute on which you'll get your visa. Right? What that means is if you go on Atlys right now, you can apply for any visa in a couple of minutes. And when you're applying, we'll tell you the minute at which you'll get your visa. So for example, 7 September, 11:31 p.m. And for more than 99% of those visas, we meet that commitment. So that's what Atlys does. And then the founding sort of insight of the genesis was that, I was in the US and I was working for Pinterest in San Francisco. And, there was a time where we had a work trip to 5 countries, and only an American team would plan 5-country tour in a month, right? And so I was having to do a lot of visas, and I realized that every country has a different process, but all of them asked me for the same requirements, same information, right? Passport, photos, and so on and so forth. So I was like, okay, what if you could standardize these processes so I could just do this process once instead of 5 times? And that still holds true in the product right now, right? When you do one visa on Atlys, we actually make you visa ready for over 100 visas. So all those visas are just kept on your app, But that's how Atlys started. It was actually a side project. It wasn't even called Atlys. It was called VDC, and most people thought that it's Visa Development Company, but no, it was for Vodka Diet Coke Labs was the original name of the company. My roommates started using them, then their friends started using, and so on and so forth. And that's, I always knew it's a big market and a big problem to solve. But that's how Atlys started, and
Interesting. So no more those big stacks of paper that you have to go every time to go to a...
Absolutely. Yeah, the goal is to simplify applying for visas and give as many Indians access to visas as possible.
Very cool. Now I remember when I had started looking at the travel space about 10-11 years back from an investment point of view, international travel was a very small market, but that has grown about 3x, 30 million international travelers every year coming out of India. And now people are willing to spend on a holiday that is international first and not domestic. I think that when you have more money in the pocket and you have Instagram trying to tell you all the cool places that you could go to, the first holiday is now an international travel. So, but for you, you started out in the US, you raised money from very marquee funds in the US, but then business focus shifted to India. How did that happen? What was the sort of journey for you to start focusing on India and solving problems for Indians for their travel and visa needs?
Right, absolutely. So I think we started in the US because of a few reasons, right? The first one was that, I was sort of foolish enough to start a travel company during COVID, but because I was in the US, and US was one of the first countries that was emerging out of COVID, right? People were traveling. So it was a good sort of niche to focus on, right? Second, I think I've always believed that like solve a problem for a very small niche first and then scale. And there our niche was immigrants, especially Indians in the US who wanted to travel and still sort of held the Indian passport. But then as India emerged out of COVID, we always knew that there's a huge market here. So I came here, and initially I didn't realize the extent to which India is growing, right? And to give you a sense, there are 30 million international travelers, but every year 10 million new passports are added, right? That means, there are more passports being issued to people in India than credit cards, and that's a big feat, right? And so the country is growing at a great pace, but international travel is growing at an extraordinary pace here, right? And what sucks is that the Indian passport is one of the worst in the world, and you need a visa to every place, and it's a dinner table conversation. It shouldn't be, right? Like, you're not discussing with friends, that how it was so hard that you paid for a flight and you didn't get a ticket, right? But for visas, I see now and again, people just keep discussing it, and I think that should change. So both the how big the opportunity is, but how deep the problem is, right, is what sort of made us focus in on India.
Got it. I know you speak to your customers a lot. So when you speak to Indian travelers, especially the younger Indian travelers, what do you hear from them? What drives them to go for international travel very early in their sort of like travel life, even though there are these issues? And what are sort of the fears that they carry with them when they try and do this?
Absolutely. So I think what drives them, number one, is just this sort of that discovery is become much easier and prominent now because content is truly distributed. Everyone has 5G, everyone has internet, everyone has smartphone, everyone's on social media, right? So that means that content, that is created, whether it's movies or influencers or, videos made by celebrities, right? That's now reaching to every Indian. So now they're more aware of the world and more aware of what's there to be seen, right? The second, the costs have actually gone down because the connectivity of India to a lot more destinations has increased tremendously, right? Earlier, there were only a few direct flights. Now, you have direct flights several times a day to many countries, right? So those are the two reasons why sort of the new India wants to travel more. And I think the fear, right? Like the biggest sort of fear that people still have, and I think it's sort of a taboo, but like people still have a fear of like having their visa rejected, right? Because if you think about the traveler journey, right? For the first time traveler, they almost have to be inducted into the idea of international travel, right? It's a big thing for them, right? So obviously that first international trip, there is it's a big moment for an Indian, right? So visa is the first thing that they're fearful of. Obviously getting there, being able to converse, right? Being able to like manage their way through is also like another fear that they have. But by and large, I feel like, people are really afraid of, of the whole visa process.
Got it. So I think this series of fears is probably a good segue into thinking about more forward-looking. Of course, visa is a big problem. It's a great start. But what all do you want to do to make travel easier for users?
Absolutely. So our mission is to enable every person on earth to travel freely. What that means is enabling, I think of enabling into two parts. One is giving access. right? That's part one. And that means giving as many Indians access to as many places on earth as possible, right? That comes in the form of visas. And the second is empowerment. How can we empower more people to travel more, right? And that means, giving people credit to travel, making sure that they have the best tool to spend when they're traveling, right? Helping them get the most out of their holiday, be it VAT refunds, be it insurance, and so on and so forth. So that's part two of what Atlys will do, is empower more people to travel, not just enable them.
Got it. And this empowerment will also require you to maybe have different business lines. So is that something that's on the roadmap?
Absolutely. So on the roadmap, we're actively working on a few, and some of them are sort of about to be launched, some of them are in planning stages. But yes, we're definitely very, very focused on it, right? Because when we actually say that, we believe that that this whole concept of strong passport, weak passport, right? It shouldn't exist, right? Internally we say helping Indians have the world's strongest passport, but that means that it doesn't matter, right? Because you should have access to every country, and and you should be able to go to any country that you want, right?
Got it. But if you look at the geopolitical state now, borders are going up. I think in any case, a visa application process does involve a lot of security related steps, a lot of documentation, because governments are fearful that they shouldn't have illegal people or people they don't want to come into their country. So maybe diving a little bit deeper into the Atlys product and the tech, how do you solve this whole documentation process, security? What does it take at the back end for you to provide this kind of high quality experience that you're targeting?
Absolutely. So I think the number one thing is that we're riding a tailwind. And the tailwind we're riding is that over 60% countries have moved to e-visas.
Yeah.
And in the next 5 years, almost most places that you as an Indian will travel to will be on e-visas, right? And this is important because that means that the whole process is digital. And when the whole process is digital, no matter how hard or complex it is, it allows us to build a truly digital solution, right? Now, the way we handle it is that we've automated all these processes end to end on the back end, right? So when you upload a passport, we run several quality checks on it. We submit the application. We automatically make sure that it's on track, it's on top. If it's delayed, then there are automatic reminders sent to the government and so on and so forth, right? But because the whole process is digital, what means that we also get a lot of data. We crunch that data and then have built a predictive engine so that we know exactly what's going to happen with your application to a high degree of accuracy and can predict when you'll get the visa, right? Which is why when we say on time, we mean it, right? So if we don't deliver your visa and we are a minute late, we give you a full refund, no questions asked, and the visa when it comes, right? That's sort of how the whole process works on the back end.
Got it. I remember when we had first met you, you had this WhatsApp bot or many WhatsApp chats that you were trying to automate, where people were literally sending their documents on a WhatsApp and you were trying to categorize them.
Absolutely. So when we came to India, Mayank, I think I realized that, look, India is a very different sort of, the target persona, the market, the culture is very different than sort of building for America, even if the users were immigrants from India, right? Very, very different. And so we've actually rebuilt the entire product for India, right? And one of the many things that we've done is that an end-to-end WhatsApp experience. If you come on Atlys, you can actually apply end-to-end on WhatsApp. You can send your documents, converse with a bot, pay, just because that's where sort of Indians hang out, right? Amongst other sort of features we built for India.
Got it. Very cool. And I'm sure you have heard this question from investors included, that international travel is an infrequent use case. So how will you sort of build a large business on top of it? How do you answer? I know the answer, you've told me, but maybe for the viewers, it'll be good to know.
Absolutely. So let me start with an interesting story, right? We have this customer called Farhan. He lives in a tier 2 city from Gujarat. He sells phones. He's an electronics shop.
Right.
He did his first visa on Atlys for his first international trip to Malaysia.
Right.
He got it. He and then I actually spoke to him, and then he was sort of I think getting that visa was a big thing for him. But we did an interesting experiment. And this is right around the time when we were about to launch this product. But what we did was we actually leveraged this information, reused all his information that we had from this first visa, and made him visa ready for a lot of countries. What that meant was that we actually pre-processed a bunch of different visas, some of them that are not dependent on dates, and just kept it on the app. We did not do any marketing. We did not do, we did not call him and tell him about them, right? We just saw that pattern that, look, even after he got his Malaysia visa, he kept visiting the app every day, every other day, right? Believe it or not, in the last 7 months, he has gotten 9 of those visas. He's paid for them. We just basically paywalled them, and he's paid for them, and he's already gone on several trips, right? So I called him, like, why are you getting all these visas? You hadn't even traveled before, right? And then he said that I just feel empowered. It's just there. It gives me access. And I think that is very strong. And sort of to the infrequent question, what we're seeing a pattern, right, at Atlys is that a lot of our customers are repeat, like quarterly repeat users, not just like, sort of every 6 months, every 12 months, right? And the reason is that when you have access, right, you already had flights, you already had hotels, everything was figured out. When you have access, to a country, and the tools to go to that country, be it booking flights easily and, booking, you're actually much more likely to travel, right? So I do believe that we can sort of shift consumer behavior here. We can take something that's infrequent and make it something frequent by just giving people more and more access. And I think this will become even more prominent when we give not just access, but also empower them to travel more.
Got it. Now, I'm sure all of us have heard that at some point in time in the year, a ticket and stay in Thailand is probably cheaper than to Goa.
Absolutely.
And a lot of people don't actually do it because, oh man, visa, like who's going to do that, right? So yeah, that'll probably be very cool if we actually make that sort of dream real for people. Very cool. And I think one of the things that was very insightful for me as well, when we initially started talking, was the role of B2B channels. We've spoken about the B2C part of our business, but talk to us a little bit about the B2B channel, the travel agents, their role. What do you do as Atlys to help that part of the market also?
Absolutely. So for context, at Atlys, we have 2 sort of lines. One is a B2C line, so travelers can come directly and apply. And the other is a B2B line, so travel agents can use our platform to apply for visas. Now, the way we discovered that there's an opportunity there is that as I started speaking to travelers, and sort of going back to the root of how they were applying, right? And this was actually outside of VFS, where, early last year when I was trying to figure out how people applying for visas, right? A lot of people did say that, that they didn't know about they were just carrying the documents that the travel agent gave, right? And a good percentage of India still uses travel agents, right? And for a variety of reasons, but I think one of the reasons is that a lot of first-time travelers have a lot of questions, and then, a travel agent helps them sort of, or reassures them that everything will be fine on their first and second trips.
Right.
And, then we started talking to a lot of travel agents and realized that they have, 2 problems. One is inefficiency, right? Like they deploy a lot of people to do visas. 2, they have a lot to lose when the visa doesn't come on time or is rejected, because they lose that customer for life, right? And so we built a platform for travel agents to do a lot of visas in a few seconds, so very efficiently, and also gave them the same certainty using the supply side infrastructure that we've built, that we give normal consumers. So they are then much more confident that that visa will come, they can book the flights and hotels of the customer, and then they'll keep the customer with them as long as other things are fine. So we're sort of like moving ahead on both fronts, B2C and B2B.
So what does this product look like for these agents, and like who are these users? Are these individual agents or are these employees of larger agents, and what does this product do for them?
So these are travel agents. These are not companies. These are travel agents, and we have both like the big enterprises and the mid-market, which are like smallish agents that still do. And then what does this product do is that they go on a web portal of Atlys, and they simply basically drag and drop a folder of the entire group, right, that's traveling.
Sure.
And then they click apply. So the whole process takes about a minute. All the visas are applied, then they know exactly when they'll get the visa, and then they'll get the visas at that time, right? So when it comes to invoicing, billing, applying, status checking, support, all of it is done, at scale and much easily for them, right? And more importantly, they don't have to sort of learn about each individual different process, right? It's just one-stop platform for them where they can apply for any visa using the same flow, right?
Got it. Got it. And you do this right now for e-visas, other visas. Like, how do you see just the visa sort of world evolving? And how does Atlys continue to grow?
Absolutely. So right now we're focusing on e-visas, but we do support other visas too. A few other physical visas that we support. And for sort of for the audience out here, like there are sort of three types of visas. One are e-visas. There are digital visas that you can apply from anywhere and online without the need of any physical documentation or interaction, and you get them on your email or your phones. Second are physical visas that are stamped on your passport, but that don't require an interview visit, right? So you can simply send your passport in and then get your visa.
Right.
And the third are physical visas that do require an interview, such as the US, right? Where you actually have to go and interview yourself, right? So obviously, right now the focus is category 1 with the e-visas, but we're also expanding our coverage all the time. So hopefully we'll cover a lot of these countries.
Got it. Understood. Very cool. And I think maybe just looking forward a little bit, given the scale that you have already achieved, where do you feel you are in the PMF journey? And are you there already, or what does PMF look like? What are the sort of metrics you chase to come back and say, I have PMF and I'm going to scale?
Right. So the way, and I'll come back to metrics, but the way I think about PMF is that I think it just, at least to me, it's just something that's felt. And there is sort of no hard metric to define.
Sure.
It just, I think you feel it. And then there was a time last year where, we're getting calls, I was getting calls from customers throughout the night. And so was the team. Our systems couldn't handle volume. Things were breaking, right? And we knew it's
that's
in a way that's good problem to have.
Right.
And I think that's when we felt PMF, and there wasn't one particular metric. It just happened, and then when it is happening, I feel that you don't realize it. Sort of like it's something where, in fact, you almost take it for granted because you don't even realize something that you worked so hard for is happening because you're so focused on just surviving and just getting to something more stable. In terms of are we there yet? I don't know. I always feel PMF is something evolving, because as you continue to grow, you have more markets, more tangential customers. But how do we measure it, right? A few things, right? Number one is NPS, which is Net Promoter Score. So after someone gets the product that you're trying to deliver, you ask them to rate you between 0 and 10, right? And then the Net Promoter Score is how many people give you above 8 minus how many people give you below 5. So we measure that. We also measure a proxy metric that we measure internally at Atlys is what percentage of our customers contact support. Because I think we believe, and contrary to what other companies may have done, is that no one likes calling support and no one likes sort of like getting calls from telecallers. So if you can make a process as complex and cumbersome as visas to one which doesn't require any human interaction, any interaction whatsoever, I think that's a problem that you've solved, right?
Yeah.
And that's the other metric. And then obviously the standard metrics such as retention, repetition, time taken to do a visa.
Got it. No, I think this product first philosophy has been very true about Atlys. I can say that from the day one when we met you. Just relentless focus on saying it's an offline process, broken, painful, I'll solve it through a product. That's been something that stands out. Good to know that is still the path for the company going forward. That's very cool. I think maybe talking a little bit about your own personal journey as a founder. A lot of people we meet who are in their sort of exploration phase of being a founder, they have like this Excel sheet of ideas and then they go through very methodically checking through. How did you have a list of ideas that you always wanted to chase and this side project that you said took off, or was it more serendipity? how did you choose that this is a startup that I want to build? And maybe it's an advice for all upcoming founders as well.
Absolutely. So, I haven't, Atlys is the only company I founded, so I can only sort of say what has been my experience. So, it's less as advice and more as just what my experience has been. So I think to begin with, one of my mentors told me that, whatever you do, either you do something that you really, really love and are passionate about, or you do something that you really, really hate. Otherwise, doing a startup is so hard that you'll get bored, right?
Yeah.
And, truth be told, it's not that growing up I was extremely passionate about that one thing, but then I actually love traveling, but I really hated visas, right? So that's how I landed up on it as a side project. And I never meant it to be a startup, right? And it just got on, and so sort of my advice sort of is just solve your own problems and then see where they go. That's how I've approached it. But again, it's, and I did not have any spreadsheet. I did not have any other ideas, but because I was solving my own problem, I was an expert at it. So I knew the problem in and out. I knew the visa process in and out, right? So what that meant was that, it saved me a lot of time in understanding the problem, right? And it allowed me to build a product that I would use, because I'm like, okay, if not for anyone, I'll at least make myself really happy as one customer, right? And then make one customer happy, then make 10 customers happy, make 100 happy. And then the problem was that when you start a travel company during COVID, that getting from 1 to 10 becomes really hard, and 10 to 100 also is really hard.
Sure.
But in retrospect, all sort of for the right reasons, so it's good.
Got it. And any sort of challenges that you faced in the early days, especially because of a solo founder? How did that work out for you?
Yeah. So, I mean, look, because it was a serendipity, right? Like, I never woke up one day and be like, I want to do a startup. My advice obviously is to find co-founders if you can. But a lot of challenges. In fact, look, right now we're talking about the market and 30 million travelers. During COVID and you've left your job, you're alone, no sort of funding. The goal is to literally get to 5 customers, right? And that is also hard because the total addressable market is barely that. No one's traveling, right?
Yeah.
But then, I actually got almost arrested.
Wow.
I was in San Francisco. I had the initial version of that app, and then no one was traveling. And I'm like, what do I do? So I realized that Turkey was open, and a lot of SFO to Istanbul, Turkish Airlines, 4 p.m., 4 flights a week. 90% of the traffic was just transit. They were going to the Middle East. 10% was still going to Turkey for whatever reasons, right? I also knew Americans need a visa for Turkey, but it's easy so that you can get it at the check-in counter, right? But they would forget because Americans didn't know about visas, right? So they would just spend a lot of time at the check-in counter. So what I did was I started going, and in the US, unlike India, you can actually enter the airport terminal without sort of any security or a boarding pass. So I entered and I started asking, and there were long queues because they would also check for COVID reports and all. So I started talking to people, oh, by the way, did you forget? And they would say yes. And I would literally tell them, you use this, if you get the visa, then pay me, otherwise I'm not here, nothing will go wrong. So I got a couple of customers, and that to me was it was a huge deal, because when you have when you have no customer, 2-3 customers, I was like, this is working really well. So I do this a few times. Then I get a t-shirt printed which says Turkey e-visa help to get more people. So I get more people. So that 2 became 5, and I'm very happy and I feel like I've cracked it. Then I get a poster made, it says Turkey e-visa help.
It's just getting bigger and bigger.
And a lot of people come. 6, 7. And 6, by a lot, I mean 6, 7 came to inquire, 4 converted, and I'm like, this is great. And everyone saw it, including the TSA. So the security at airports there. They came, they're like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm a student from Berkeley. And they're like, no, you cannot be here. Please get out. So I said, okay. So what I do is I get out to the point where Ubers drop you. And then they see me again and they come 10 and they're like, when we say get out of the airport, we meant get out of the airport. So they're like, we'll arrest you. And then they take me and then literally take me to the airport metro and keep me. And they're like, if we ever see you again, you're going to be behind bars. So, but well, we did get our first few customers like that, but yeah, it wasn't.
That's hardcore growth hacking, right?
Well, there's no option back then.
Yeah, very cool, very cool. That's a very cool story. So you mentioned about no funding during COVID and travel startup. Maybe that's an interesting segue into talking about how did you think about capital raising, capital partners? How did you go about raising your seed round and Series A? Maybe a little bit of your journey on that dimension will be helpful for everyone to hear.
Absolutely. So I'll start with a pre-seed round that we actually were able to raise, without any customers, led by South Park Commons in December of 2020, so peak of COVID. And then we raised a seed round. And I think one, I think we've been very lucky. But two, I think I think just knowing the customers in and out and like doing everything possible to get those insights, right? For example, right, like obviously I was my own customer and I built that initial product, but I needed more insights. I needed to learn more about it, right? And so what I did, and again, goes back to like COVID, what I did was I realized that, when I was in the US, there were these dating apps that were community based. So like Chinese people had a Chinese dating app and Indians had a Desi dating app called Dilmil and so on and so forth, right? So I went on all these dating apps, created profiles because I'm like, this is my target audience. These are only immigrants from these countries that have weak passport. And I started, engaging with girls and then started sort of talking and going to dates just to understand how they travel and what they travel.
So you went on actual dates?
Yeah, several. And
you
kicked
didn't
out.
Get arrested
And kicked out. Like, obviously some of them understood, but few of them did not. But what that meant was that I actually had was able to get really, really interesting insights, right? Like, for example, right, like that Indians only travel, like, for example, any Indian traveling to Japan, for example, I know they've already been to Schengen, they've already been to US, they've already been to all these countries, right? So I started sort of getting really cool insights that helped us build the best product, have a very good go-to-market and so on and so forth, right? So it allowed us to very easily raise our pre-seed round, even though we had no traction, just because the insights were really solid. And then the seed round also, which was led by Andreessen Horowitz. Obviously, after that, we started growing a lot. We grew a lot, not just internationally, but also and specifically in India. And then I think I met you all, Amit, Mayank, you all, and then Sequoia. So yes, and I think sort of what I've learned during my limited time is always raise more than what you think you'll need, and then always spend less than what you think you should.
That's a good strategy to have.
Yeah. So Mayank, like a question for you is that what about Atlys stood out to you? And then, how did you discover us and what led you to invest in Atlys?
Sure. When the world was coming out of the pandemic, all of us started traveling. And you would go to any WhatsApp forum, Twitter, wherever, there was this big noise about all the backlog that was there for visa application. And it was a painful process. Borders were obviously much higher. And we started thinking internally in our team that what if there is a really cool product that makes things easy for people just to apply for the visa? To the simplest of facts, that if you can just tell me conclusively these are the documents needed for this country, that's a big value add because there are so many spurious websites that existed. Then we did some bottom-up math and we felt that in India itself, the opportunity could be $1 billion plus revenue opportunity. And of course, it doesn't stop it in India. There are many countries that have the similar issues, weak passport, as you said. So we started looking around and we actually came across Atlys. We used the app. I think the app used to work in India. At least it was not geo-blocked, so that was a good thing. And we felt that the product was just really neat. It felt like a product built by somebody who knew the customer, who knew what workflows will work for the customer. And at Elevation, we have this sort of like philosophy that we want to back founders who are customer curious, who are very, very focused on customer insights. So that product showed us, and we reached out to you, we met you, and I think all the good insights that you shared earlier in the podcast, those came out in our conversations. We knew this person understands the customer and wants to build it for the customer. And I think when we looked at some of the metrics, like I think you had grown about 10x in about 9 months with literally the same cost base. We felt not only is the product really working, customers are loving it, but also this is being built on a tech product first basis and not a business where you're throwing people at the problem, where you're just saying, hey, there's an offline process, I also have an offline process. No, if there's an offline process, this is a 10x better way of doing it on product. To us, just the size of market, your customer focus, and those initial early trends from the customers made us just super excited to lean in and just say, we want to be part of this journey.
Amazing, very grateful. And I actually vividly remember that, and perhaps the first and maybe the only time, I'd never met an investor that was as prepared about the market and about visas as I was. So the conversation was much more free-flowing because I think you had done some like 100 pages of internal report and analysis. So it was like directly jumping into stuff that I was trying to solve. It was more brainstorming and figuring out, and then actually like, like me pitching. And I still remember like we had, I think, 3 meetings and a couple of them were like literally brainstorming because you all knew so much about the market and about the problem space. So as a founder, that was actually very, very interesting and much needed.
Yeah, no, thank you. When two travelers talk about travel problems, we'll find a solution.
Yeah.
No, good. Thank you, Mohak. Thank you for joining us and taking everyone through your amazing journey. And I think there are many more good things to come. And for our viewers, if you have a visa problem, you know where to go. Atlys is your answer. And if as an entrepreneur, you are building any groundbreaking idea, do reach out to us. Write to us at day1@elevationcapital.com or find any of us on LinkedIn, Twitter, and we'll be more than happy to speak to you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mohak, once again.
Thank you.